Abbiamo il piacere di avere con noi Declan Donnellan e Nick Ormerod, Chick by Joel, compagnia straordinaria fondata nel 1981 da questi due signori che sono qui accanto a me e che abbiamo già incontrato lo scorso anno con grande divertimento. Consentitemi una piccola digressione personale. Anche lo scorso anno facevamo un laboratorio di critica teatrale e... Non funziona? Sì, ok. E chiedemmo a Declan e Nick di poter assistere ai lavori del loro workshop e abbiamo ricevuto un categorico no. Non siamo stati ammessi al workshop. Oh. E da lì è nata una grande amicizia, diciamo così. Perché giustamente regista e scenografo, dobbiamo capire dove inizia uno e dove finisce l'altro, di Chick by Joel, tutelano con grande cura, con grande attenzione il lavoro che fanno con gli attori e lo tutelano anche nei workshop, tant'è che anche quest'anno non possiamo assistere a quello che state realizzando. Quest'anno abbiamo avuto in più il piacere di vedere uno spettacolo, Bourgeois, al Teatro La Fenice, che ben raccoglie alcuni temi importanti della produzione del percorso, del lungo percorso artistico dei due artisti. Intanto un percorso che la compagnia ha fondato soprattutto sul confronto con i testi classici. Dovremmo ancora capire che cos'è un classico, ma magari lo scopriremo nel corso di questi incontri. Soprattutto Shakespeare, naturalmente, dalle prime esperienze alla Royal Shakespeare Company fino a un percorso che ha portato Donnellan e Ormerod a lavorare ad esempio in Russia, dove è nata una costola, una sezione russa appunto, del Chick by Joel con spettacoli che poi sono stati presentati anche in Italia. E partiamo però dal lavoro che abbiamo visto ieri con grande divertimento e con grande piacere. È interessante notare come quella scenografia estremamente curata, realistica, renda vivo, possibile il patafisico di Jarry. In qualche modo ricollocarlo in un ambiente millimetricamente studiato come reale dà senso e sostanza a una scrittura che normalmente troviamo nel null part, no? Il nessun luogo. È molto bello anche vedere come quel nessun luogo diventi il salotto di casa nostra, magari anche un po' Ikea, no? Il salotto che può essere parigino, ma può essere romano, può essere veneziano, può essere sicuramente italiano. No? E allora lì vediamo come il gioco di Jarry, scritto nel 1896, questo testo, sia in realtà una violenta accusa, allora come oggi, alla mostruosità della borghesia. Sono tanti riferimenti che possiamo chiamare in causa, forse più cinematografici che teatrali, ma tutti di grande efficacia. Allora io partirei proprio dal lavoro che avete fatto. Voi eravate già stati in Francia, chiamati da Peter Brook, ne ricordavamo adesso con il collega amico Antonio Audino, per mettere in scena Racine. Quindi il massimo della forma, il massimo del rigore. E adesso vi siete confrontati con un testo che è l'esplosione, la rottura, è stata la rottura della forma, quasi forse un testo che ha aperto in qualche modo il Novecento. No? Probabilmente in teatro il Novecento è un secolo lungo, non è un secolo breve, si apre nel 1896 e forse si deve ancora chiudere. Però certo Jarry ha scardinato tutte le forme. Allora perché questa scelta e perché questa decisione di ambientare così, in modo così forte, in modo così strutturato il Bourgeois nel salotto borghese?
want to let's talk about it. We had, thank you very, very much. It's lovely to be here again. We enjoyed working with these actors very much, simple as that. And we had a great time doing Andromark, and we wanted to work with them again. And we just spent a long time trying to find another text that we could do with the actors. So we had no more vision than the simple human joy of working together again. So we didn't choose Ubu because we had something to say or anything like that. We just, the primary reason was because we just loved working with these actors and we wanted to go on working with them. So yes, I should say that I need to say that one first. Then everything else comes second.
Ma allora perché la scelta di questo testo?
Sorry? Well, because it fitted each of the actors perfectly, because we loved doing Racine, and when you do Racine, I mean, Racine's quite funny in a way, and the Jarry is quite sad. I mean, I think I'd find it a problem to do Feydeau because it is so terribly sad. But I could see when we were working on the Racine how funny these actors were. And I thought it would be a good text to do with them. It's a text we'd known for a long time, Ubu, and it seemed to fit them very, very well. Of course, we try always to choose plays for pragmatic reasons, because if you said to us, what play do you most want to do now? What do you most want to say? What do you most want to say to the world? What do you most want to teach people? I would go into a complete panic because I don't think that's my job. Nick and I try to find practical parameters, but then normally as soon as we... It's interesting, it's like you play a game on yourself. You choose the play for practical and human reasons, and then it's amazing how timely and important the play seems after you've chosen it, if that makes any sense. I would be lying to say that we chose Ubu because we wanted to say things about how we live now. How we live now comes out naturally through our work.
Sembra tutto molto semplice, no? Detto così. Jarry però si porta dietro appunto un universo, un immaginario, un'idea che è, come dire, fortemente connotata, e voi l'avete smontata per reinventarla dal profondo, svelandone anche ulteriori significati, restando da un tempo filologicamente corretti, legati al messaggio originale di Jarry, e però raccontandoci anche il nostro tempo. Qual è stato il percorso allora di riscrittura drammaturgica sulla scena?
I can best answer that, I'm afraid, in a roundabout way, going around like the Boig. And I think that we have only one priority in our work, and that one priority is that our work should seem alive. And so it's great to have priorities. We all like to have priorities, but unfortunately, we live in a mad world that tells us we can have many priorities, and of course, we can't. So some of you have been through educational establishments that are private and say that they exist to give the best possible education to their students, and their other priority is also to make a profit. I would say that that's not possible. There can only be one priority. You can have only one priority, and the others become ranked afterwards. And our only priority is that our work should be alive. I think you can't make priorities unless you let things go and deprioritize. And deprioritizing is very unfashionable and very painful because we live in a world which has driven us mad by telling us we need never lose anything, we need never give anything up. And I think I think when Van Gogh saw his sunflower, he didn't see a new sunflower. I don't think he tried to see a new sunflower. I think what he did was he was able to let go all the other sunflowers he was used to seeing. It's an act of abnegation, of giving up, of saying goodbye to things, of being able to endure the loss of things. And I just have to put it in that negative way. So, you know, we weren't trying to find new meanings in Ubu. We were trying to lose old ones, if that makes any sense, and just to see how well we could do it. So, for example, Jarry writes a lot about how it's, you know, very much about his school teacher, Ubu, and so on. But, you know, what people say is interesting, but it's only interesting what people say. What we say, what I say, it's merely interesting. It's not everything. And the more we read the play, the more I didn't think it was anything to do with his school teacher. I thought it was much more to do with his parents, and it was much more to do with an Oedipal situation with a son. But of course, that occurred to us because we had an extraordinary set of actors. And it's quite mysterious how that alignment happens. But I can tell you that Nick and I did not conspire together alone, or even with the actors trying to find a new interpretation. It happened quite organically, solving problems in a very small way. It happened without having a grand vision. It happened. We asked ourselves the question, like, what is the circumstance within which this play could be written, and in which this language could be invented? So that's how we got there.
Ha citato più volte giustamente lo straordinario cast, lo straordinario gruppo di attori bravissimi, magistrali nel creare questa continua rottura tra apparente normalità e dirompente follia. Qual è il contributo che ciascun attore dà nel momento creativo, in questo teatro vivo che continuamente ricercate e proponete sulla scena? C'è un lavoro anche di improvvisazione, c'è un lavoro di creazione collettiva, o sono determinate le scelte registiche già prima di affrontare le prove?
I think when reading the play, and I think it's not, I think the danger with Ubu is that we might see it in a way that's folklorique. I think that Ubu, there's tremendous rage in the play, and it's the rage that only really very young people are capable of feeling. We get expert when we're older at not understanding that we feel these rages. I think one of the reasons why we find children frightening is because we remember our own childhoods and how overwhelming our emotions were and how painful those emotions were. So we are frightened by children, so we sentimentalize them. I think that's what we do. It was interesting reading Ubu, but I would lie if I didn't tell you the story of how it happened. Our company had rented a very elegant flat for me and Nick in Paris, and we were very pleased. And it was very bourgeois, and it was very white, and the man took us round, and the kitchen was a work of art, everything was in marble and so on. We said, this is fantastic, you know, we're just theatre people, we shouldn't be staying here, you know. And then we saw a little notice saying, on the work surface in the kitchen, you can't cut any fruit or vegetables because it will spoil the kitchen. And another one about these splashes have to be cleaned up. And it was also very hot, and we couldn't open any of the windows. And then there were signs saying we couldn't walk on the parquet below for certain. And after a while, Nick and I, we would come in at night at about 5 or 6 o'clock, twitching. And it was so hot, we used to take off all our clothes and then cook swamp food in the kitchen. And we slowly, in this apartment, transmogrified into Mère et Père Ubu. And we wanted to, you know, the kitchen was, the bathroom was so elegant, you were frightened to shit in it. And so we put that on the stage, really. And we just located in ourselves this, and there was the white walls and very funny works of art on the wall to us, and we were dying to put tomato ketchup on the walls and so on. We used to have fantasies, and we invited the actors round, and the actors, everybody had to go shh, and then the more we were shushing in the flat, the more we were laughing, and that kind of fed into the play. But, you know, I'm making it into a funny story now, but as I do, as is, you know, a dangerous thing to do, but that sort of Prozac hysteria of modern life kills people, you know? So it's not just about aesthetics, it's about the amounts of anesthesia that we have to give ourselves to watch the news on television, which is obscene most evenings. And we listen to the 8 o'clock news, and we have our little bag of salad, and we hear of 200 boys who've been killed in Afghanistan, and we're mad, you know. It's very important. So, I mean, there's a very serious side to the whole thing as well. So that's what we were inspired by that, though, during rehearsals. I would be lying to you if I said we came in with that idea, and we would talk with the actors, and we tried many different ways of doing it, but it's that rage with the parents who are made of, there was a substance in England called Teflon. Do you know what Teflon is? You put it on pans so it doesn't stick, you know? People said about Blair to begin with that he was the Teflon Prime Minister because nothing stuck to him, you know? And, you know, you're very lucky in a way if your parents are difficult, but if you have Teflon parents, that's really very frightening. And so these are part of our inspirations.
Mi vengono in mente due domande. Intanto la prima. Nello spettacolo però alla fine si arriva a una ricomposizione borghese. Alla fine il figlio, dopo il suo sogno violento, si siede a tavola e mangia. È un segnale di pacifica, è un segnale di rassegnazione?
Oh, I don't know. That's for the audience to decide. I must say, I find all this talk of bourgeois makes me feel very uncomfortable. Because it's like as if we're all lying, that we're like not all bourgeois who are sitting here. I mean, we're talking about ourselves, not the bourgeoisie. We're talking about how we live, you know. We've been to dinner parties like that. We've thrown dinner parties like that. We live in everybody here in this room became bourgeois, even if not beforehand, the moment they walked through the door. So we're only talking about ourselves. We're not talking about these other rich, strange people. We're talking about everybody else here who didn't vote for Berlusconi 5 times, however many times it is you didn't. But we're talking about ourselves.
Ok, grazie. L'altra domanda era relativa allo spazio scenico. Lo spazio scenico è fondamentale nel vostro percorso artistico. Tutti, o quasi, mi sembra di capire, gli spettacoli nascono da una determinazione scenografica, ambientale, fondamentale. In questo caso volevo capire qual è stato il lavoro fatto da Nick Ormerod nel tradurre il vostro appartamento sulla scena.
Well, again, it was a process of watching what the actors were doing. We were able to rehearse over a split, not particularly long period, but it was at least split up, so one had time to think about it. And just watching what was needed, in a sense, and the discoveries that actually most of the actors made of how to use the space. For example, the way the canapé was used was entirely, as a grotto, was entirely created by the actors. So in a sense, the space developed itself, and once it had been set as the dinner party, which again happened quite slowly, I can't remember where that came from. Once the space was set, then the actors were free to play, and I seem to remember us going out of rehearsal quite a lot, and looking forward to coming back and see what the actors had created, which was very exciting. So
Yes.
my process, my function, I think, is to stand back, really, and not to interfere, just to do the minimum, which is fine. The less work, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, my work is better the less I do as well. I mean, after a while, we'd been working, I think we had other ideas. One of the things we were going to do was something very politically incorrect. I mean, nothing could be more politically correct than beating the bourgeois, but actually what's quite interesting are, we were going to set it in different social milieu, and, but this one suggested itself. But after a while, Nick told us basically what the set was, where the doors were, where the kitchen was, and then we were off. And a lot of it was the actor's invention. What was quite funny was for the dîner bourgeois, I had to do the, we did that sort of rehearsing that I personally don't much like, which is that sort of, the characters that they play. You know, they did through the most sort of Nazi form of method techniques, you know, so they'd write full biographies of their characters and so on and so forth. So they did all of that, and that was great fun. We don't normally work like that with the actors, but they will have full biographies of those characters at the bourgeois dinner. And the big important thing to remember was that those characters at the dinner are the play, that the Jarry play is secondary. It's not a framing device. It is that the play is about the bourgeois dinner. There I'm using that word again. I keep thinking of that story about the three fish. An old fish swims past two young fish, and the two young fish say, the old fish says to the young fish, "The water's great." And as he swims past, the two young fish look at each other, and one says, "What's water?" And so I feel rather strange talking about being bourgeois as if it's not the water in which we're all swimming at the moment, at least in this space.
E il personaggio che cos'è? Cosa è rimasto del personaggio? In generale, non in questo spettacolo, naturalmente.
I'm so sorry, I genuinely don't really understand the question.
Chiedevo una definizione possibile del personaggio. Stiamo parlando nel teatro contemporaneo da tempo della scomparsa, della fine del personaggio a favore della presenza del performer, no? Di una presenza fisica più biografica dell'attore interprete sulla scena.
Well, I mean, what I would say is that there's no such thing as character. We just live in different spaces and see different worlds. And the only way that I'm different from you is that what I see there is different from what you see there. That's how we're different. I think thinking about characters is not terribly interesting. Well, no, I think it's interesting. That's the problem. It's only interesting. What's alive, which is more important, is the fact that we just see different things. So I can't, you know, my other story is, you know, somebody once asked a rabbi why nobody could see God anymore, and the reply was, the reason we can't see God anymore is because nobody can stoop low enough. And I don't sort of think in grand terms like character. I don't even think in grand terms like situation. What I work on is space, which is both physical and psychic, and what people see in the space of the theatre, and what people see when they come to the theatre, and what I see, and what the actors see, and what we can all see together when we see things together. I work on things like that, and I'm decreasingly interested in story, emotion, because emotion follows what we see. You know, if I see what I feel comes from what I see, and then I have to try and see what I feel. I put everything through the nexus of seeing, so I can't really answer a question like what is left of character. I don't think anything we do is going to change anything. We just have slightly different ways of seeing things, that's all.
Io ho ancora un paio di domande e poi vi chiamerò in causa, ci sono sicuramente domande da parte del pubblico. La prima domanda è questa. Nel 2001 Declan Donnellan ha scritto un manuale per attori, una riflessione sul teatro, che era The Actor and the Target, un ottimo libro, vi consiglio di cercarlo. Sono passati un po' di anni. Se dovesse riscriverlo oggi, cosa cambierebbe di quelle teorie, di quelle ipotesi e di quelle idee?
I think I just do it better, but I'll try to do it better, but I don't, the basic assumptions, I still see more and more clearly that, you know, we are so vain, we imagine we can do things that we can't do, you know, and, for example, an actor cannot transform, you know, so a lot of actors beat themselves worrying why they can't transform. Of course you can't transform. Thank God you can't transform. You're going to be... But you can see different things. You can see different things. And it's what we see that's the discipline. And the stakes exist in what we see. So no, I would just develop it more, and I'd go much more down that I'd go much more down that path. I'm trying to write another book. I mean, I have a lot of things to say. I'd like to talk about the performance of everyday life, and I'd like to talk about some things that I think are a disexperience. And I'd like to write about intimacy. You know, it's how easy it is to trash, and how I think one of the things that theatre can do is make a space in which we can be intimate with each other, because we have so many demonic devices now to trash intimacy. I think we've always wanted to trash intimacy because it's so dangerous. But, you know, people have often committed genocide. It just took the technological advances of the 1930s to make it industrial. We've always wanted to avoid intimacy, but the technological advances of the last 15 years have allowed us to do it on a truly mind-boggling scale, so that we can have many, many more ways of being remote and dealing with people in a virtual way. And I think theatre's very important. If I'd interviewed me 30 years ago, I'd have thought I'd have very much been talking about art for art's sake and so on, and I don't think that anymore. I think increasingly art and theatre are very important. I think one of the very important things about theatre is that it helps us to empathise, that we are taken out of ourselves, and we need to learn empathy. We're not born empathetic. We have to learn to be empathetic, and it's difficult to realise that we are not at the centre of the universe. You know, the Renaissance has a lot to answer for. Man is not at the centre of the universe. We ain't going to destroy the planet. The planet's going to go on quite happily after us. We might just destroy our own means of living in it. We fill our space, and it frightens us. And I think theatre is very important because it helps us to see what it might be like to be another person. I think it helps us to see what it might be like to be another person in a different set of circumstances, what another world might be like. It just helps us to imagine what it might be not to be me with my self-obsessions. And I think that's a very important thing, and I think it's very sacred, and I think it's something that needs to be protected. And I feel increasingly clear that theatre has a role, and I feel decreasingly confused about the importance of theatre as I grow older, funnily enough.
Vedete come dal pragmatismo iniziale siamo passati a una filosofia, a una ricerca dell'uomo su se stesso con grande bellezza. Chick by Joel è venuta in Italia con spettacoli fatti da attori russi, fatti da attori francesi. Che differenza c'è? Come è cambiato? Come cambia l'attitudine attorale nell'ambito europeo? Cambia qualcosa?
No, not really. I think actors are very similar all over the world. I think I could tell you lots of funny stories about the difference between the Russians, the French, and the English at dinner, in rehearsal, at a party, in a shop, talking to a waiter. at curtain calls. I could give you lots of anecdotal differences, which would be very funny, but or maybe boring. But essentially, the problems that actors face are the same. What you can say is completely different, though, are the political structures and the cultural structures in different countries. And that means that the theatre reflects, I think theatre reflects the cultural structures in the country, and that, I think very often cultures get the theatre they deserve, So it's, we have to lead, but, So I think that you can see things about how countries are different from the different way that actors and different problems you would encounter in rehearsals. But, this is just merely interesting. Again, this is merely anecdotal difference. The thing that's really important are not the things that separate us. The things that are really important are those things that we have in common. And that is, I think, simply what a piece of classic art is. It's something that makes me understand I have a common humanity with somebody who may be dead, somebody who may be from a completely different culture, somebody who may be a different sex, different age, completely different story from mine. I understand, I resonate that I have something in common with that person. And those are the important things about actors. And in a way, if we've had any quest, although Nick and I haven't had any quest more than to have an extremely good time at places like Venice at the Biennale. Thank you very much. We love your hospitality. But if we have had any quest, it is to find out what it is to be truly human and to celebrate that and find what remains after the anecdotal and cultural differences have dropped away from us, as the flesh will rot from our bones, to see what it is we have that burns in our sacred human hearts in common.
Domande del pubblico. Una qui, 2, 3, 4.
In inglese va bene?
Sì.
No.
Before seeing this piece, Jerry, I read the text and I found for a 19th century piece, it was amazingly new, but I think it would be difficult to show this newness to the public in the stage. Reading it, it's different from showing it. And what you did was how something quite different from the context of society can be suddenly emerge. This piece, very modern, it's emerged in the 19th century, the century of Musset. And I think that you have picked up the character of Prince, and he is a protagonist in a sense. And I think that the key word, his first utterance, this Yubu is a stupid guy. And I think you have picked up from that word the key and a little bit the concept of the whole structure. And I just want to mention about the end. I love the end. I have seen your piece 3 times, Opera Falstaff and Twelfth Night, and this one. Every time I feel at the end happy, and you give us the happy feeling, and somehow there's much of conflicts, much of intellectual struggle, but the end somehow it ends in lieto fine, and spiritually lieto fine. And I think this is really what you said, that the theater must be somewhat simple, in a sense. That gives people happiness, in a sense. I little bit feel that it's your philosophy. I'm sorry.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm incredibly touched by what you say. Because some things that depress me, I'm very happy to discover they might give joy to somebody else, And thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed Falstaff and Twelfth Night in Russia. They're very different experiences, done under very, very different circumstances, very different contexts, very different political, theatrical structures. Yes, I feel rather sad when the boy joins the parents at dinner, But, you know, I did. I suspect most of us did. Most of our kids will. And it's just quite good every now and then to look at... It's good every now and then to empty our prisons and see who we've got locked in there for life, you know. We put them back in again, but it's quite good to see what we hold under lock and key. And it's just a way of doing that. But thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Seconda domanda qui al centro.
Si è detto che la tecnologia in un certo senso anestetizza la verità delle cose, eppure in questo Uburua si decide di affidare a un ragazzo in una sorta di videogame psichedelico della sua mente, non si capisce poi bene cosa sia ed è bello che sia così. Allora perché la tecnologia dovrebbe in qualche modo salvare appunto dall'anestesia, pur essendo essa stessa a creare tutto ciò?
Oh, well, thank you, but I've no answer. I've no answers to any of these questions. I mean, I don't know. I mean, technology brings good things and technology brings bad things, you know. I mean, it's interesting now, if you go to a hospital now, you know, you bring somebody to intensive care who's very, very ill, you know, they'll probably be saved. It's very interesting seeing what gets better and what gets worse, you know, so you might get genius consultants who will be able to save your elderly parent, but they might be killed by the nurses who are too qualified to clean their bottoms anymore. You know, we win things and we lose things in life, you know, and technology does very good things and technology does very bad things. It depends. But it's, so I'm not saying it's bad at all. I'm not a Luddite. I mean, I can, you know, I'm on the BlackBerry all day long. But there are problems. We just need to watch it. I don't think we're different, basically. I think intimacy has always threatened us. And we cover it up. We sing a lot of songs about love. But really, you know, it's one of the last things we want to do. But technology just gives us many more means of doing those things. I don't think technology is very good at bringing us together, not really. But it does other good things, but not that, I think.
I'm currently reading The Actor and the Target, and it interests me very much, and I'd like you to go over a little bit more in the sense of the target, in a sense that you just said, we are what we see.
Yes.
And to mention one perspective, physical, quantum physics,
Yes.
what we see
Yes.
is a reflection of what we are, not to mention philosophy or psychology.
Yes.
So if we don't play characters,
Yes.
if one actor plays Juliet or Desdemona,
Yes.
wouldn't be the same thing? Because it is seeing from the same place, the same...
Yes, but first of all, it is seen from the same place. That's the first one. So we have to be very humble, unfashionable word. It is seen from the same place. But Juliet lives in a very different world from Desdemona. Funnily enough, they live very close to each other. One lives in Verona, the other lives in Venezia. Verona seems to have some kind of Catholic church. Venice in Othello is amazingly secular. I mean, it's an incredibly secular state. They live in very, very different worlds. They both, interestingly, marry men that end up killing them, which I think is quite interesting. So I think they maybe got some things in common. They both have problems with their parents, but of course it's completely different, you know. I mean, they're both much more bright than the men that they marry. And they both, but Desdemona is, they see completely different things. They see completely different things. I even find the word situation to intellectual, funnily enough. It's just enough to just see, you know, to see, they just see different things. They see different things in their different worlds. And I think that's the only transformation that we can make. That's as near as we get to it. I do think every time we open our eyes, we've made a work of art. That's what we do. I don't believe human beings are creative. I think human beings have a much more profound gift than creativity, and that's curiosity. And that's what I think is the really important thing. But I think trying to be creative, trying to be original is terribly vain, because that was done, you know, we've been made original. We have been created. Now we've got to see reality. I think we've been given our imaginations to see reality in all its stupendousness, and we have not been given our imaginations to create alternative realities, because that's a cancer of the imagination. And if reality is not enough, just look up on a clear night and try and keep calm. But it's actually very difficult to look at all the stars without starting to think, there's quite a lot of reality left for me to see, and see what's really happening, than to be inventing other ones. So, yeah, seeing it's a lot, and it's hard. I think it's not the function of my job, for example, humbly, to talk about myself. It's not for me to see the invisible. Do you know, I always think the artist sees what's obvious. The problem is most of us don't see what's obvious. You know, Caravaggio saw what was there. It's stupendous, but he saw something that was so obvious, other things that were so obvious no one else had seen them before. It's not... We must be very careful of Gnosticism, of the idea that only clever people have the secret key to open the secret door with the secret words and the secret langage and the secret words and the secret. I mean, you just have to see what's there. We're all going to die. None of us see that. You know, let's think about that. Well, not think about it, that's too complex, but we could try and sort of see that and understand we won't understand it, and maybe see it until we get used to it a bit.
Un'ultima domanda? Forse abbiamo tempo anche per un ulteriore. Comunque, prego.
Grazie, buonasera. Ho amato molto alcuni spettacoli shakespeariani di Declan Donnellan Nick Ormerod e quelli che ho potuto vedere naturalmente qui in Italia, e amo moltissimo Racine, quindi mi incuriosisce capire come si sono incontrati questi due universi, anche chiedendo allo scenografo da un punto di vista formale, proprio visivo, e se nel lavoro su Racine c'erano dei cambiamenti di angolatura prospettica come c'è stato nel caso di Uburoi. Lo chiedo appunto perché mi interessa sapere come avete lavorato rispetto al testo, ma anche perché, mi perdoni la semplificazione, in qualche modo mi sembrava che qualcosa vi portaste dietro nel lavoro su Jarry di Racine, perché in fondo anche qui la storia è sempre quella di un desiderio, del tentativo di compierlo e poi di assistere al fallimento del tentativo di compiere il proprio desiderio, e spesso la tomba che si chiude su questo desiderio è sempre la tomba della società. A volte mi sembrava che gli attori veramente raffinatissimi suggerissero con dei passaggi di intenzioni recitative qualcosa che forse poteva echeggiare, qualcosa di raciniano, ma forse è soltanto una mia fantasia. Ecco, vorrei sapere che atteggiamento avete avuto rispetto a questi testi che sono straordinari ma anche difficili da maneggiare nella loro struttura così articolata e severa. Grazie.
Yes, well, thank you very much, and I very much agree with you, or I think what's behind what you're saying is they're both plays about very similar things. There's a lot in common between Ubu and Andromaque. I think they're both about our terror of they're about chaos and our terror of chaos, and that's what My White Flat in Apartment. You know, the more you see order, the more you suspect chaos. You know, and when you have a friend whose flat is, if you go to somebody's house and you put down the glass and they move it like that because it's in the wrong place, it doesn't make you think this person is very disciplined. It makes you feel this person's terrified of chaos. This is, you feel chaos, you know, when that sort of ultra-constipated order makes you, it implies the exact opposite. You know? So You know, when elderly politicians have facelifts, they do it to make them look younger, but of course it makes them look much older. You know, the story goes both ways. And I think, though, all I would like to say is philosophically, I think there's a lot between Racine and Jarry. I think Thomas Ostermeyer was joking with me last night, and he was saying, you've done a concept. We've always been joking about German concept theatre. And, but in fact, I think Jarry does, we do think Jarry does need something to make it, it needs some explanation, Jarry. I don't think you can just sort of do it. That's for us, that's our limitation. We feel it needs something to make it happen. You have to somehow, because Jarry's great experiment, like Nijinsky's great experiment 15 years later, were brilliant, you know, with The Rite of Spring and so on, but in a funny way, it didn't lead to a great movement, as far as I understand, Jarry. Although William Butler Yeats was there at the first night, and it was so strange, you know, when there weren't that many people in the Théâtre de l'Ouverture, and Yeats was one of them, and he was very frightened, because it was very chic, it was very trendy. He felt very inferior, like we all feel, you know, when you can go to an art exhibition at the Biennale and feel really stupid because something's happening and you don't understand it. And that's what he felt. But he knew there was something important happening. And he said, after us, a savage God, which is, it was like, he knew that his world was about to finish. And then he changed and he became an extraordinary, very modernist writer in a way, Yeats did by the end of his life. I'm sorry, that's off the point. I'm not really answering your question. I think it's very interesting. The terrain of your question is very interesting. I can't answer specifically because those are exactly the things that interest us. But we try to keep small, we try to keep concrete and specific in the rehearsal. You know, Nick gives us the discipline of the space. Nick says you can have, you know, after a while he said, there are these props, we'll film them, we can't use any more. And, you know, we make the world on very, very small things. And we're always at our best, well, it's the practical things that, you know, where the emotion happens, you know. It's, if somebody dies, you can't really feel anything about their death. But if you find their old shoes, you feel something, you know. It's the concrete thing that makes us human and that connects us. But the idea of death or the big thing is quite abstract and doesn't really help. I'm aware I haven't answered your question, but thank you for the thoughts that were behind it. Thank you.
Io ho un'ultima domanda per Nick e Declan Donnellan. State già organizzando, pensando a una sezione italiana di Chick by Joel, visto che lavorate con attori russi e lavorate con attori francesi, perché no con attori italiani, visti che sono 2 anni che fate workshop in Italia?
Well, it would be wonderful, but we have our work cut out, I have to say, with our French and Russian. Both of them are quite demanding, and both of them don't like to be neglected for 1 second. So to add another whole nation would be a little bit, might look a bit like empire building, I don't know.
We're already conscious of being international prostitutes, and and I was 60 yesterday, and it has less dignity now, you know. But we have between the English, the French, and the Russians. And then I fell in love with a group of Italian actors, some of whom are here today, and they brought me a very nice hat that I'm extremely proud of. I have it there. And I do form attachments, and I was very sad last night going away, and it does happen. I mean, I'd certainly like to keep my connection going somehow, but we only do one thing a year, and that we expect that to live and do the, you know, go to the theatres that we need to perform in. So it is a little bit difficult for us, but we're very fond of Italian acts. I'm completely fascinated by commedia, interestingly. Very interested. And I've got a funny feeling that Nick and I might discover that we've always been commedia dell'arte directors without having known it, Because whenever I see things, we recognize things so much, like many of the movements, many of the characters, so much. So it's maybe a good idea, maybe not to, because maybe that's what we are, you know. But not quite, but I'm very, very interested in certain aspects of commedia.
Grazie a Nick Ormerod, grazie a Declan Donnellan, grazie a voi, appuntamento a domani.